Star Trek, The Next Generation, Starfleet Academy, Loyalties. Chapter 11. "That's it," Beverly whispered to no one in particular. "Admiral, I remember now where I've heard someone talking about viruses before. It was in class. Medical ethics," she said, and turned to the cadet across the room. "It was Stephen Cody, Commander Wiley's assistant." She looked over at Mrs. Owner and saw the older woman nod. Beverly was shocked to see her face neutral, the usual smile on her face gone. Wiley was stunned. He slowly turned to Stephen, his mouth open in amazement. Stephen looked around like a caged animal. "Don't be silly. Beverly pointed at Stephen. "You were the one who said you wanted to work on getting viruses out of computers. You said you had been doing it for years. And I assume if you can get them out, you can certainly get them in." Suddenly, Cody ran past Wiley in a computer console, heading for the door. Before Beverly realized it, he was running in her direction. Her reflexes were quick, and he fell to the floor as she stuck out a long leg in front of him. Data was suddenly by her side, pulling Stephen to his feet. The cadet struggled for a moment, then stopped. "Let go of me," Stephen growled, shrugging off Data's grasp. I'll stay." Wiley moved forward to face Stephen. "Stephen," he said quietly, tilting his head to one side. "Why?" "What do you mean, why?" he responded, his face contorting with anger. He looked at Admiral Moody. "I really didn't want to hurt anyone," he said to her, then turned to Wiley. "I just wanted to get you in trouble and hopefully kicked out of Starfleet." "Me? You wanted to get me kicked out of Starfleet?" Wiley asked. "Yeah, you," he answered. He looked directly into Wiley's eyes. "Everyone in my family has been in Starfleet. My grandfather, my father and mother, my aunts and uncles, and my sister wanted to get into Starfleet Medical more than anything else in the world. For years I listened to her talking about Starfleet Medical, about being a doctor. She wanted to help other cultures to become a doctor on a Starfleet starship," he said. He shook his head with the memory. "But she didn't get in. And she missed entering the program because of just one person, Commander Max Wiley." Stephen leaned on a nearby desk, his back toward Moody and the others. "Beverly was right," he continued. "I entered a type of computer virus into the simulation. As the commander's assistant, I knew his entire schedule, and after a while, I was even able to work out his computer authorization code. I've worked on computer viruses for years. Since I know how to get them out of a program, I know how to get them in. So I slipped my customized virus program into the computer earlier in the day. I even kept up a fight with Imto Particle so I would come to class late, just to add to the confusion and throw off suspicion." Without saying a word to interrupt Stephen, Beverly nodded to the Admiral, confirming that Stephen had come to class late. "It was easy for me to send the virus through the program at any time," he continued. "I just had to push a few panels at my console. The virus program was sent out to seek a holodeck medical tricorder. When it eventually found one, the program would cause the scanner to send out a signal, an asynchronous, invisible field that shocks the scanned person. I tried sending it out during Beverly's simulation, but she was pointing the medical tricorder at a holodeck simulated Andorian ensign. So all that happened was that small shock she felt, not enough to cause suspicion. I called back the virus, and that's when I decided to send it out during the Romulan bird of prey simulation." Beverly listened as he further explained how he didn't know who would be the team for the simulation, but it didn't matter. She shivered as she realized she could have been badly hurt or could have been chosen for the fated simulation. She watched Claire's face turn pale as Stephen continued his explanation. I never tried the program on anyone, so I didn't know what would happen, but I didn't really mean to hurt anyone. I thought the dosage would be like a light stun with a phaser. I didn't know Peter would get hurt. During the confusion after Peter was hurt, I called the virus back into my personal computer tape so no one would find it. After everyone left, I stayed behind to make sure that any question asked during an inquiry would show the simulation had not been tampered with. At least I thought I did, he said, pointing to Data. I hadn't counted on Data showing up to ask questions. I did not show up, as you say, declared Data. It was Cadet Howard who brought up the possibility. I reasoned out the actualities. As Data motioned to Beverly, Stephen turned to her and shook his head. I should have known the future Starfleet space doctor would be the one who kept asking questions. Why couldn't you just leave well enough alone? I was trying to help. Some friends, Beverly said softly. Stephen ignored her and turned back to face Wiley. And at the bottom of all this, emphasized the cadet, was you. I knew the accidents would eventually be your fault. After all, the professor in charge must make sure everything is correctly maintained for the cadet simulations. Wiley ran his hand through his short hair. Stephen, he said, almost in a whisper, your sister was just not right for Starfleet this year. It happens. We feel there are some students who are not quite ready for Starfleet. Your sister did poorly in the simulation entrance exam I gave her. That's why I didn't recommend her entry into Starfleet at this time. Yes, but the simulation wasn't fair, Stephen retorted. She was thrown into a shuttlecraft that was adrift. How would she know how to start the shuttle once it shut down? We weren't asking her to start up the shuttle, Wiley said. We were trying to see her reaction to an emergency situation. Even if she didn't know what to do, there were certain responses we were looking for. But I felt that she did not act appropriately for a first-year cadet. That's all. And Stephen, she can try again next year. Stephen smirked at the commander. Yeah, that's what she's going to do. And if you were out of the picture, I know she would have a better chance. That's why I did it, he said. He flopped down into a nearby chair as if he was too exhausted to stand. Admiral Moody frowned as she stood in front of Stephen's chair. She looked down at him, then turned to Wiley and the three cadets. Commander, you and the cadets are dismissed. Beverly looked back as the door hissed closed. She saw Stephen put his head in his hands. Mrs. Owner was standing next to Admiral Moody. Your sister may or may not get into Starfleet Academy next year, the Admiral was saying. But if she does, she'll be here without you. The three cadets walked in silence out of the holodeck building, the commander following close behind. Beverly was glad they had finally found out the truth, for both Claire's and Commander Wiley's sakes, but she was sad that Stephen Cody was guilty. She knew he had thrown away his chance of ever becoming a Starfleet officer. Beverly took a deep breath as they reached the outside. The warm breeze off the ocean seemed to refresh her. I will be going back to my quarters now, Beverly, said Data, turning to face her. I am pleased everything has been resolved. So am I, Data, she answered. She took Data's hand and gave it a quick squeeze. He tilted his head, and for a moment Beverly thought his face registered surprise. Apparently, he was not used to such a friendly handshake. Thanks so much for your help, Data. I couldn't have done it without you. The android nodded briefly to her. If I may say so, you too, Beverly, would make an excellent detective. You have the commitment to find out difficult answers. I have also noticed that such a quality is a sign of an excellent doctor and Starfleet officer. Beverly smiled at him and straightened her shoulders. Thank you, Data. I hope we can meet again. He turned and nodded to Claire and Commander Wiley, then walked away. I owe you both an apology, came Wiley's voice from behind the cadets. Cadet Howard, I didn't believe that you had been shocked, and Cadet Boy, I really thought you did something wrong during the simulation. I had no idea it was my own assistant who caused the problem. I believe I was blinded by my own troubles. Claire smiled at the commander and held out her hand. I'm just glad we could get to the bottom of this, she said, shaking Wiley's offered hand. Beverly reached out and also shook the commander's hand. He hesitated for a moment. May I ask why you both were so diligently looking for who was guilty? Beverly smiled, relieved to tell the truth. I knew Claire wasn't guilty, and I really didn't believe you were guilty. I know how much you love Starfleet. I learned that from attending your classes. Deep down inside, I just couldn't believe that you would ever jeopardize your chances of staying here. And if anything rubs off on me, I hope it's the same type of commitment to what I do, she thought. It was the first time Beverly had ever seen Wiley smile. She liked the effect and hoped she would see it more often. Thank you, Cadet Howard, he answered. I really do love being in Starfleet. But Stephen Cody did too. But I think he loved his sister's dream of being a doctor more, she responded. It was early evening when Admiral Moody called Beverly and Claire to her office. Wiley was there too, standing tall and smiling broadly. And I have these two cadets to thank, along with Cadet Data, Wiley was saying. Admiral, I hereby personally withdraw all complaints against these two cadets. Consider it done, answered Moody. Commander, the investigation is over. You may return to your normal duties, and now you have your work cut out for you, finding someone to replace Cadet Cody. Wiley's face dropped for a moment, then he smiled. I know just the person, or persons, he said, turning to the cadets. Cadets Howard and Voy, I am very impressed with your thoroughness and ability to reason. I am requesting that you both become my new assistants for holodeck simulations. I could use two excellent cadets like you. Wiley turned back to Moody. Now I realize the position is usually filled by a second-year cadet, but I am asking you, Admiral Moody, for permission in this special case. Granted, of course, Commander. Beverly wondered if Claire's jaw was on the floor, too. They both murmured their thanks and asked if they could have time to think it over. Yes. Please think it over, both of you. With your permission, Admiral Moody. The Admiral nodded to Wiley. Cadets, I will see you in class. He was still smiling as he walked out the office door. Admiral Moody motioned for Beverly and Claire to sit next to her on the window seat overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. You are both officially off probation, she said, leaning back in the seat. The sun was just setting along the coast. They watched as the last sunbeams coated the room with yellow and orange, the colors playing across the shimmering Nereid art harp on the wall. Beverly felt relaxed and tired all at once. For the next hour, the Admiral and cadets talked of life, Starfleet, and nothing in particular. It was just good to be there. Chapter 12. Ouch! Beverly jumped back as the porridge popped and bubbled in the pot. She leaned over, turning a dial to adjust the burner on the old stove. The bubbling slowed down and she stirred the mixture. It was her own concoction, remembered from a breakfast her grandmother used to make. She took a deep breath as the smell of chocolate surrounded her. Claire was taking a chocolate cake out of the oven and setting it to cool on a nearby counter. Mrs. Owner was sitting at a nearby table, chatting with the cadets as they worked. And after such a busy week, Beverly was glad for the distraction. "Are you two ever in for a treat?" said Beverly, carrying the pot to the kitchen table. Leaning over, she poured out the porridge into 3 bowls. "This is authentic, well, almost authentic, Scottish porridge with all the trimmings." "Trimmings?" Claire retorted. She wrinkled her nose as she smelled the porridge in her bowl. "What trimmings?" "Something my grandmother always used to add to the porridge." "Oh, just humor me and taste it," Beverly said, sitting down across from Claire and dipping a spoon into her bowl. She swallowed a spoonful and smiled. "Close. Real close to the way I remember it." Claire's eyes went wide as she ate a spoonful of porridge. "Hey, Bev, not bad. Speaking of your grandmother, did you hear from her yet about your adventures at the Academy?" Beverly smiled at the memory. "Yes, she just smiled and said, 'I told you Starfleet Academy was perfect for you, and I notice you're not so homesick anymore.' She knows me." "Ah, Beverly, she does know you," said Mrs. Owner. "And while we are enjoying your delightful meal, I think Claire has something to tell us," she said, looking at the cadet next to her. Claire sighed and looked down as she stirred her porridge. "I told Commander Wiley I didn't want to be his assistant." "Me too," Beverly added. "I've had enough holodeck adventures for a while. I told him I'd rather concentrate on my medical studies. Plus, I may want to take on some extra courses next semester. But I did suggest that he check out Dooley Breach's record. He would make a great computer assistant." Claire nodded. Beverly, I've made another decision too." Beverly held her breath. Claire never called her Beverly. "I'm leaving Starfleet Medical," Claire said, looking up at her roommate. "But—" "No," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "I've thought long and hard about this, and I made up my mind." Beverly's spoon clanged loudly as she dropped it into her bowl. Suddenly, she was not hungry. She knew Clara was still disappointed in her performance during the fated simulation. But with the mystery solved, she thought her roommate was happier. Why would she make such a decision? "Just because of what happened with Max Wiley?" she asked out loud. "No, it wasn't only that. I feel that Starfleet Medical, or Starfleet in general, it's just too competitive for me. There are too many pressures. It just isn't something I want to do anymore." "But you're one of the best students," she said, then hesitated. "Oh, no. Are you going to become a professional tennis player?" Claire laughed. "No, Bev. I'm done swinging a racket, and I don't want you to think I've given up completely," she continued. "I've signed up for a special program. It's for people our age to work and train in medicine specific to a certain planet." She turned and beamed at Mrs. Owner. "And I've been chosen to train on Mrs. Owner's planet, Molden." "What?" "Ah, Beverly," said the Moldanian, turning her smiling face toward Beverly. "You do not know. Here I am called Mrs. Owner, an ambassador. On my planet, I am also called doctor and healer. My empathic and telepathic abilities help me to understand those I cure." "But Claire doesn't have such abilities," said Beverly. "It is true, but she will learn about herbs, spices, and remedies to help those who are ailing," answered Mrs. Owner. "She will do well." Clara laughed. "Mrs. Owner has a great deal of faith in me, but she also showed me the lists of plants from Molden. I know my biggest problem will be to learn how to pronounce all the names. Beverly didn't share in their laughter. She had no doubt that her roommate would do well in Malden, but it was the thought of Claire leaving, especially after all they'd been through, that hurt the most. More than ever, Beverly was determined to stay in the academy and become a Starfleet medical doctor. For some reason, she felt Claire would feel the same way. "Hey, Bev, really, it's all right," Claire said, reaching over and patting Beverly's hand. "I still want to be a doctor, but I've just decided to choose a different path to get there. And I guess my first patient is you. How about a nice cup of lemon tea? Not from a replicator." Toting a heavy suitcase was never one of Beverly's most favorite pastimes, and now she was helping Claire carry 2 bags to Mrs. Owner's in preparation for their flight to Starbase 515 and on to Malden. She sighed as she read the sign on the front door of the cafe. Closed. She knew it would be there permanently now. Several boxes were stacked just inside the door, and large metal containers lined one of the walls at the back of the cafe. The chairs and tables were still there, along with the old stove in the corner of the kitchen. Beverly wondered who would live there. Who could take the place of Mrs. Owner? As Claire went into the kitchen, Beverly walked over to Mrs. Owner in the far corner of the cafe. She was puzzled as she watched Mrs. Owner carefully wrap several strangely shaped sculptures in packing, then place them gently in a metal box. The Moldanian woman looked up as Beverly approached. "Ah, these are ancient African sculptures made of okumi wood, Beverly. They are from Admiral Muti. A going-away present," she called them. "But I will see her again." "How do you know?" asked Beverly, tilting her head to the side. "I know." "Mrs. Owner," Beverly asked, kneeling down by the older woman as she packed, "what is it like being a doctor?" Mrs. Owner stopped packing and hesitated. "It is difficult and beautiful," she replied, then resumed packing. "You must help a patient under your care even when they seem to be difficult. You must help a patient even if you do not agree with them." She sealed the lid on the metal box. "I've certainly learned that lesson in the past week," commented Beverly. "Then there are problems with overcoming your own attachment to a patient, yet being able to treat them," continued Mrs. Owner. "And there are problems of keeping yourself balanced during an emergency, to focus on your patient." Beverly sighed. "Sometimes I don't think I can do it." "Ah, Beverly," she said, her eyes twinkling as she looked at the younger woman. "That is the beauty of being a doctor, the challenge of trying to save a life and to overcome all the obstacles placed in your path." Beverly leaned over and hugged Mrs. Owner. "I'm really going to miss you. And you know what else?" she asked. "I've almost completely forgotten about being homesick." A knock on the front door interrupted their conversation. Beverly heard the shuffling of feet on the porch and many voices talking at once. "Mrs. Owner," a voice said as the front door opened, and Gren Edith leaned into the room. Right after him, Imto Particle, Dooley Breach, and Tkavar pushed their way into the cafe. "Ah, welcome, cadets, Grand Imto, Dooley, and Tkavar. Good enough," Mrs. Owner said, standing up and walking toward the cadets. "I am glad you received my message. I did not pack everything yet. I wanted to prepare dinner for all of you to thank you for helping Beverly and Claire in their quest for the truth, and of course to celebrate Claire's future as a doctor and healer on Muldan." She led the cadets to chairs around the largest table in the cafe. Beverly sat across from Claire. I can't say I'm glad that you're leaving, she said, but I really do understand. We have to follow our own way. She smiled at her roommate and held up her cup of tea. Here's to a doctor's life. Claire smiled back and raised her cup. May we always be healers, to others and to ourselves. Laughter and talk soon filled the room. Beverly looked back into the kitchen. Mrs. Owner took the first plate from a stack on a nearby table, scooped out something from a pot on the stove, and put it on the plate. And Bev, said Claire, watching as the older woman walked over to the table and reached around Beverly from behind. Did I ever tell you that Mrs. Owner makes the best food in this part of the galaxy? Beverly's grin widened as she was surrounded by a wonderful smell. In front of her was a perfect plate of Gringle Dash.